It is. I am thrilled to have you here, honored to have you on the panel tonight. This is a really important topic. I've been looking into this over the past few days and can't wait to hear your perspectives on it. So, everybody who's in the space here tonight, please give us a retweet. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. You can retweet by clicking on the chat bubble at the bottom right-hand corner. And we have 30 minutes with Marianne tonight, so we're going to have a few questions about her campaign and about Cop City specifically. And we will invite listeners up in a little bit, hopefully, for a couple questions as well. And we'll be live for a little bit after that as well. So if you want to talk to us more afterwards, feel free to stick around. But Marianne Williamson is a political activist. She is the author of 15 books, a non-denominational spiritual lecturer, and New York Times bestselling author of 7 of those 15 books, selling over 3 million copies. Her career began in the 1980s, during which time she became deeply involved with the HIV and AIDS epidemic and the activism around that. She's a longtime champion for the LGBTQ plus community. She founded Project Angel Food to deliver meals to the homebound, unable to shop or cook for themselves. And to date, that charitable organization has served over 16 million meals. She's also founded the LA Center for Living, the Manhattan Center for Living, and co-founded the Peace Alliance. She has been a nonprofit activist throughout her career, produced numerous progressive candidate summits and podcasts to encourage women, LGBT, racially diverse progressives to run for office. In 2020, as many of you remember, she ran for the Democratic nomination for president and is now here running for the 2024 Democratic nomination, challenging President Joe Biden and environmental lawyer Robert F. Kennedy Jr. As an essential part of her platform, Williamson proposes a 21st century economic bill of rights, Department of Peace, reparations for slavery as well, a Department of Children and Youth, universal health care, tuition-free college and tech school, and a just transition from what she calls a dirty economy to a clean economy. And she was born and raised in Houston, Texas, born in 1952, and has one daughter, India Moore Nisbet, who is married and lives in London with their newborn daughter, Elizabeth. Before we get into the questions, Marianne, I know you were sick with COVID in the past few days. How are you feeling now, and how has life on the campaign trail been treating you, other than coming down with COVID?
Well, thank you. I'm fine. In terms of COVID, I had a mild case, although it definitely took my voice away for a few days. And I don't think my throat is completely over it, but other than that, I am, so I'm grateful. And the campaign is like no other experience. Parts of it are exhilarating, and parts of it are very hard. But I suppose that's what you would expect being in the belly of this particular beast.
Absolutely. And so much respect to you for getting out there and, promoting this politics of love that I think love and peace is really missing from our political discourse today. And I think you bring a really valuable voice to this
Well,
campaign.
thank you.
To get into our first question here, this $90 million facility it's officially called the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center. The official description of the facility is to train firefighters and police officers safe driving techniques, lab to develop and test technological innovations, training fire station, mock streetscape to simulate real world crisis situations, and that it will emphasize cultural awareness and community knowledge. Yet, from what I have heard from you on the campaign trail and from activists protesting against what is being called Cop City, this is an acceleration of the militarization of America's domestic policing that can be traced at least back to the passage of the Patriot Act in 2001. So, could you first just speak to the history of what led to this facility a bit, the context within which it's being constructed? Essentially, how did we get here?
I don't know a lot about the history of it. I know that I first heard about it several months ago. I don't remember how, but I started writing about it on my Substack. From the very beginning, I found it very disturbing. I think it's very ironic that they call it the Atlantic Public Safety Training Center because I think it's a serious threat to our public safety. Our public safety is held together by the fact that we are a free society. And Cop City, and I'm going to continue to call it Cop City because that's what it is. Cop City is more than the militarization of police, as though that's not bad enough. It has to do with separating police from the rest of the population. That right there is a serious problem in America. Remember, the police are not the military. The military is trained to see those with whom they interface as the enemy. This is a domestic police force which is not supposed to see the population of the United States, the citizens of the United States, as the enemy. That's why they've been traditionally called peace officers. Once you put this kind of training facility deep inside a forest, no less, my God, it's not only separated from the rest of the population, but it's deep inside this dark forest area. Now, what does that mean? That means it's going to be separated from the people. So, first of all, just the psychological element right there that you are separating the police from the people. You are actually fostering an us versus them attitude. That's number one. And number two, with that, its placement, it becomes very, very difficult to monitor what's going on in there. Very difficult for the people of the United States to monitor what's going on. The whole point of a free democratic society is that the power is supposed to lie in the hands of the people. Once you start putting that much power in the hands of the police, you're in trouble. And I know Americans don't like to use the phrase police state, it makes us very uncomfortable, but we are way past the point of worrying. That such and such could happen here. We're already at a point, whether it has to do with climate catastrophe or many other things, including this, where things are already happening. So I have had tremendous respect for the people who have been protesting this. When you look at the corporations that are funding this, so now then you have the death of Tortuguita. That right there, this is the first time in American history that an environmental activist has been killed by police. This is huge. And now, God, thank God they're not killing other activists, but they are actually arresting other activists. This issue of the RICO charges against people. If you read about what's going on there now with all of these people who have been arrested, who've been thrown in jail, who are going to be charged, that we have criminalized protest in the United States. So already everything that's happening with Cop City should make us extremely disturbed. The entire civil rights movement, under the laws they are now trying to describe it and to effectuate it, the entire civil rights movement would be considered domestic terrorism. Our right to protest is sacrosanct. This is everything in a free society and according to our Constitution. So this is the worst kind of marriage of corporate and governmental power. And I think that it is not hyperbole to say this kind of thing is a prelude to fascism. It is not hyperbole to say that it is the template for a police state. And in the wrong hands, it would be a training center for urban warfare against our own people. There's something very, very sinister about it. And I have tremendous respect for those who are protesting it. And everybody should be very aware. Read the articles about this. There are people who have been arrested for simply passing out flyers. This is the United States of America. We have the right to peacefully protest. And the murder of Tortuguito should make everyone very upset. And I'm going to tell a personal story of mine, actually. I was in Atlanta, and I was at a party, and I met the mayor. And it was a kind of elegant birthday party. So, I mean, I wasn't going to behave in a way that wasn't, appropriate to the evening. We were both invited guests. Um, and I made some very respectful comment about it. And man, the way he talked to me, there was a viciousness, and he didn't know who I was. He didn't know that I was a presidential candidate. Um, but man, he like, whoa. And I just, before I conclude, I just want to say that the silence, whether it has to do with Senator Ossoff, Senator Warnock, and let's not forget, Andrew Dickens is a Democratic mayor. The way even the Democratic officials are working to basically suppress the voices of the people in Atlanta, um, these are the kinds of things that we criticize Republicans for. And also, part of their narrative is that a lot of the people who are protesting are quote unquote outside agitators, which is hilarious. This is the kind of language that they used back in the 1960s and 70s when I was growing up. But I'll tell you something, this is an American issue. This is not just an Atlanta issue, because Cop City is a template. And if they're successful there, which they are, why are they so, something's going on here. The kind of viciousness, the kind of force that is being used by those who want to build this, it goes beyond something you would just want to do if you just wanted to do a training facility for your police. What kind of training? What are we talking about here? And of course, they would see this as a template that they would use in other cities. So this is not just an Atlanta issue. This is an American issue. And each and every one of us should do everything that we possibly can to raise our voices and to resist this.
Marianne, I think that you're absolutely right. We need to be concerned about this, particularly because, as you said, it could be a pilot program for other cities. Why do you think they're going in this direction? What kind of threat do you think they could be anticipating?
Well, what we have is we're living in a moment. It's like where the Atlantic meets the Pacific, right? And there's great turbulence in the times in which we live. One way which is basically one in which a kind of marriage and extreme corporate dominance are married, um, is being resisted in the most traditional American way, because we resist tyranny. The power is supposed to be in the hands of the people in this country. But if you look at the demographic and who we the people are now, in terms of color, in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of ethnicity, what many of us look at and go, this is so exciting. The 21st century could be such a flowering of the ideal of the United States, the multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-everything. It's quite beautiful, the possibilities here. But there are forces which represent the power that has been dominant in many ways since the beginning of our history, for whom what you and I might see as the great flowering of the United States is a threat to their power, the annihilation, in a way, of the very kind of unfair, unjust power structure that too often they represent. And this has been with us from the beginning of our history. When you look in 1776, the signing of the Declaration of Independence, you had 56 men who signed that document. And that document was, and the principles inherent in it are profoundly enlightened. And they posited in a founding document for a nation the most enlightened social, moral, and political principles that had ever existed. At the same time, 41 of those 56 men were slave owners. So that is basically the story of America. The story of America is a great both and. We are both. This possibility of social enlightenment, such as never existed on the planet before, and in every generation from the very beginning. And every generation has played this out since the beginning. Ours is no different. There have been those whose hearts were ablaze with the possibilities inherent in those ideals, and there have been those who, for their own ideological and financial purposes, had no intention whatsoever of seeing those principles actualized, and have proven throughout our history that they would go to whatever lengths necessary to make sure that they would not be. In that sense, and I speak about this in my campaign as it pertains to the entirety of our social structure and struggle today, not just Cop City, we are simply living out the latest iteration of that struggle. And it's basically the powerful versus the powerless. It is basically an elite, what is now a corporate elite, because look who's funding Cop City. A corporate elite versus really the safety, health, and well being of the American people. And when you have, once again, this training center inside a forest somewhere, for God's sakes, where basically, I mean, it would be very difficult to monitor what exactly is going on in there. And I have been to such a training facility in another country that was a military training facility. It's not what we want in the United States of America, I assure you.
I did have a question following up on that point you're making, which is that, and first of all, thank you for joining our space today. It's wonderful to have you
Thank
here.
you.
I just wanted to say really quick, why is it that other presidential candidates, you were touching on this in terms of our history, but why aren't other presidential candidates talking about Cop City? Because police affect everyone in all 50 states, especially the militarization of the police. It's a huge issue. Why do you think the individuals running both against you and in the Republican Party are completely absent on this topic?
Well, that's for the voter to ask themselves, not to ask me. Um, but the question then becomes, if you agree with this, why would you do anything but support the candidate who is talking about these things? The system is in the thrall of the status quo, and I'm not.
Yeah, I completely agree. You're definitely not a status quo candidate, Marianne. You're doing really great stuff out there,
Are you guys there?
and
Oh, can you not
Uh,
hear Alexander?
no, I'm sorry. No, did
oh
he
no.
say anything in response to what I said?
Here,
Yes,
I
sometimes there's audio
Oh, I'm
issues
sorry.
and we can hear him, but you
Oh, I'm
cannot.
sorry.
And I believe if he drops, we'll get his question in later.
Yeah.
But I do believe Holden had a question on the environmental
Okay.
aspects of this Cop City.
yeah, Alexander will drop you down and bring you right back, my friend. But Marianne, this has become a national story due to this impression and fear. This is of the acceleration of the militarization of policing in America. But this has a major environmental element to it as well, which you touched on a little bit, which, you know, is what many of the protesters were protesting against in the first place. So could you speak a bit to the environmental element of this story and how you see this movement uniting activists of different backgrounds?
Well, it's very rare that you have this kind of huge forest inside a large urban center. This was an extraordinary urban forest in the middle of Atlanta. And I think people such as Tortuguita, that was their original impulse, I believe, was the protection of the forest. So it's just, I'm in New York City right now for Climate Week, and I was at the march to end fossil fuels. But I think that we are coming to the point of realizing, more people are recognizing that even though it seems we have many different problems, environmental degradation, militarization of police, um, uh, income inequality, there are so many different problems. But I hope that there is an awakening. I know my campaign is certainly based on the realization that underneath them all is a single root cause, a kind of plague on our society today, and that is corporate greed. So unfettered capitalism that has completely uh, swayed from any moral center is basically sociopathic in nature. There's no sense of ethical responsibility. It is completely devoid of a moral dimension. There is no reverence. There is no respect for nature, for humanity, for other species. So life is cheap in that case. The trees, cut them down. People, well, a few die. This is really what we're dealing with, although I remind you, this is not really new in American history. And I also remind you, take heart, because other generations have risen up and pushed back on this stuff before, and it's simply our turn to do that now.
Yeah, the environmental issues are extremely serious. And to go back to my question before, and I hate to bounce back a little bit. Unfortunately, I had the speaker issues, but my question was, what would you do about Cop City if you became president, and how will you lead the nation in police reform?
Well, those are two very different questions. The first one, I'm not actually sure within the purview of the executive branch and what the executive power actually is regarding Cop City. It's a state. This is about the city of Atlanta, so I'm not sure. The legal authority that the president has on something like this specifically, I would certainly be looking into it. And I can certainly tell you that with the bully pulpit, I assume I don't know enough about it because I have not read anything about this specifically. I can't imagine that someone's not trying to sue, whether it's the ACLU or any other human rights organizations. I can't imagine that somebody's not trying to sue the city of Atlanta or the state of Georgia over this. I would certainly, um, within the appropriate use of the executive branch, would support that in any way. But I don't have any illusions about actually how much the president could do beyond the bully pulpit. I'd have to look into that in terms of legal authority. In terms of police brutality, militarization of police in general, I can tell you this. I would say to Booker and to Tim Scott, I would say, you're coming into the Oval Office, or you're coming to Camp David, whichever it would be. You can bring whoever you want with you, but we are not leaving until we have hashed out a bipartisan bill. It is absolutely outrageous. Given the George Floyd protest, the BLM protest, which was the largest social, political protest movement in American history, and yet there has not been one fundamental legislative reform. I would be very intense about this. I would not shut up. I would not let up. It's not simple. You have something like 150,000 different police forces, but I would make this actually a cornerstone of police reform. Would be a cornerstone of my presidency.
I think we would all love to see that. There's constant talk about it forever, right? Like you hear people in DC talk and talk and talk about this, and just nothing ever happens. The two parties can't come together. There might be solutions out there, but they're not happening in DC. So I appreciate that. I'd love to turn it over to Bryce now. Bryce, thank you for joining us. Go ahead, my friend.
No, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to talk to you, Marianne. I saw your interview on Rising recently. I thought you did great. I thought that was outstanding. I did have a question for you that kind of was touched on by the previous speaker, is that I think sometimes this gets boiled down to a left versus right issue. I think effective policing is something that we all want. I guess my question to you is, it's kind of a broad question. Do you think there's a way to thread the needle? I mean, I personally don't want police militarization, but when we get into like defunding the police, what's happened in cities, like I live in California, like what happened in San Francisco is they started to take money away and then crime went up. There is a happy medium in there. Do you think we can thread the needle?
Well, actually, we should be careful on that one because when Cesar Boudin was recalled by the people of San Francisco, in time he was actually vindicated. In time, his policies were actually deemed to have worked. In general, however, of course, I agree with you. We want effective policing, but we've also come to understand how many, and there are many police people who will agree with this, how many cases that police are called to work on that should have nothing to do with brute force, that are much better handled by social workers, are much better handled by people who know about conflict resolution, who know much more about de-escalation. For that matter, one of the things that Americans should be aware of is how differently American police people are trained compared to other countries. You look at a country like Germany, for instance. We put people into training for not all that long, and then we send them out there with the power to exercise lethal force. In other countries, such as Germany, there's a lot more education involved, and also a lot more education in de-escalation. I think all of us have seen the videos, all of us have seen the tragedies. We've asked, why'd you have to kill him? Why'd you have to kill him? Why can't you shoot him in the leg or whatever? We've all had those experiences. So at this point, I don't care if you're on the left or on the right. We've all seen enough. I think that this is actually one of many areas where this is a real moment of opportunity. I don't care if you're on the left or on the right. It's the right these days. We're talking about obliterating the FBI, for God's sake. So things are changing. This is a moment of profound political realignment in this country. I don't think either major political party has its finger on that pulse because they're living in their own sort of bubble. But there's a possibility now to talk to people, not as a lefty or as someone on the right. We need to get out of our silos, um, speak beyond our labels, and know that the axis of that matters here is not left versus right. The axis that matters here is powerful versus powerless, and that's powerful as in whether it has to do with financial power, military power, governmental power, police power, and that's dichotomy that we need to be concerned about today. It's not about threading the needle, it's about how police should operate. And but I'll tell you something, no matter what kind of changes we make, and changes do need to be made. And I think what you said is very true. We all want effective policing. It's not going to be solved and it's not going to be helped by putting the police in some area deep inside a forest where there can't even be real civilian oversight. That's not the way this should happen.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Marianne. And I appreciate your point too about just, this is not about left versus right. There is a realignment happening, and 50% of the country is now independent. Those are the people that are deciding elections. And this two-party system is clearly not representative on either side of, what the American people want anymore.
Well,
I'd like
also,
to, yeah, no, go ahead, please.
well, this sort of takes us to a different topic, but one of the things that I speak about quite a bit in terms of the policies that I'm promoting in my campaign, the majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want universal health care. The majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want tuition-free college and tech school. The majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want universal background checks. So, and that includes gun owners. So I think there are a lot of issues, not just the ones we are discussing here specifically tonight, in which the problem is not division among the people. And I see that running as for president. I saw it last time and I see it this time. The people are not the problem.
That is the point right there. The people are not the problem. I appreciate that. Paul, I'd love to bring you in here just to let you know Marianne has just a couple minutes left. So if you could just keep your question pretty brief, we would love to get to one more after that as well. But go ahead, my friend.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Marianne. It is an honor. Thank you for coming on here today and all that.
Thank you.
Huge fan of your economic Bill of Rights and all that. I actually cover 9 out of 10 of them in my own book, The Red Herring Effect. My question for you today in relation to Cop City and all that. There's an article that I read from the American Friends Service Committee by Akira Rose, and she talks about how 43% of the training at Cop City will be officers outside of Atlanta, including military training. And with the research that I've done in my book and all that in relation to privatized prisons, do you think there's a connection between privatized prisons and the building of Cop City and potentially other Cop Cities outside of this? Because I think there's a lot of corporate money going into this, and there's a huge push for it.
Yeah, first of all, what you just said was horrifying. I mean, I'd never even heard that number, about 43%. It's terrible. And yes, of course, there is so much money to be made. We need to dismantle the prison industrial complex. One of the things that I've talked about in my campaign, it's time for us to end the war on drugs. Almost half of the federal prisoners in the United States are there for nonviolent drug offense. So the answer, when I said earlier, the deeper cancer here is corporate greed. So in that sense, all of these things are connected to all of these things, whether it has to do with private prisons, whether it has to do with Cop City, whether it has to do with environmental degradation, whether it has to do with the military-industrial complex, whether it has to do with income inequality. Absolutely. They are all held together by a cancer deep in the bones of our democracy.
We did have one final question before you head out. I believe your time is gone here. It's 5:30. We're almost right on the dot. And that is that I've seen a few articles out there, but if you're able to debate RFK, if we're able to get him in here into a Twitter space, would you be willing to debate him?
I have asked publicly if Bobby would debate me. I don't, and have not gotten a response to that. I think, first of all, I think both he and I are concentrated and focused on the idea of a debate with President Biden. I also think that something is happening. Something has happened in the last 2 or 3 weeks regarding the Biden candidacy. So I think we're all sort of on tenterhooks right now, wondering what's going on inside the inner sanctum of the Democratic Party. So, yes, I have already put out a public invitation for Bobby to debate me. Right now, he's talking about debating Biden. I think he likes to pretend that I'm not there. Although he's only in the latest poll that came out in terms of national averages, we are only three percentage points. I'm 3 percentage points behind him. Yeah, I would like as much conversation, as much debate as possible. Whether Twitter Spaces would be the best place for that, I don't know. That would take a lot of reflection. I don't know what the best context for that would be, but yeah, I want to debate my opponents, certainly.
I think that's what, people are starving for, more democracy here, right? We're seeing this kind of degradation of the democratic process under President Biden and the DNC's rules here. And people are really starving for this. People are starving for candidates to come on forums like this, like you are tonight. We're so grateful to have you on here. I know are you out of time now?
No, I mean, I can stay for a few more minutes if you would like. And I do agree with something that you just said. We're not going to save our democracy by suppressing democracy. I mean, we need to have a fuller expression of democracy, not a diminished expression of democracy.
100%. I think that is what's so lacking in our system today that people are desperate to see. I'll get to one more question here that I was thinking. I saw that you were able to do a firelight chat with the mother of Manuel Esteban Terran, who goes by Tortuguita. And I just wanted to ask, what do you think needs to happen for justice to be delivered in this situation? And is there a message that this young protester's mother wanted to be delivered to the American people that you feel, you could share with us?
Well, I hope that everyone will go listen to that beautiful testimony from Tortuguita's mother, a very inspiring woman who has really become the mother of the movement, And if you go to Marianne2024.com and you look at the Firelight chats there, you will see my interview, my Zoom with several of the Stop Cop City protesters, organizers, activists, and of course Tortuguita's mother. It is outrageous. The autopsy shows that Tortuguita, this was murder. I'm sorry, this was murder. And obviously that has not been proven in court, but the placement of his hands at the time, of course this should be a court case. Of course it should be a court case. And as his mother, of course, she wants to see justice done. What mother wouldn't? We all want to see justice done for Tortuguita and for the forest and for the people of Atlanta and for the people of the United States.
Thank you for that. It was a beautiful conversation. I was able to listen to that in recent days, and I'm glad that you were able to have them on and some other folks as well from the community in Atlanta to talk about what this means and what's going on here. I'd like to go to one more question from Tim. Tim, thank you for joining us. Go ahead, my friend.
Hello. Hi, Marianne. I appreciate you being here with us tonight. and I appreciate what you're doing by challenging your own party a bit with your candidacy. I just had a question though, a little bit about the Cop City situation. A lot of with all the police brutality issues we've had in this country, so many people have said better training is what's needed for for our police officers around the country. And having family in the Atlanta area, I know the area has experienced a high increase in crime in general, spreading out to not just in the city but into the suburbs, which don't normally experience it, which is a whole nother story. Why people are bringing it up now or whatnot, but um, my understanding is it might be a good thing to have better trained police forces as opposed to a bad thing. Now, if they're doing militaristic training and stuff of that nature, that's a completely different story. But as far as I know, that land is just old land. It was an old prison farm that's just kind of been dilapidated and has been sitting there for years unused. And the Mayor Bottoms allocated it as the only acceptable place in the city for it to for this complex to be built. So I'm just wondering if it's a general distrust that a lot of people have for police nowadays that is maybe convoluting what is actually going on there. But I don't know enough about it to say. So I pose the question to you.
Well, it's already been said here tonight, not just by me, but someone else. We're all in support of better police training. And we're all in support of police getting what they need to do their job effectively. That's not even in question. What we're talking about here is whether that should be within a context of something so separate from the rest of the population and a situation that is so um, not amenable to any kind of civilian oversight. And when you talk about effective policing in a free society, you are not talking about militarized police. The people of the United States should not be deemed the enemy. And as far as the prison that you're talking about is concerned, you can look right now on the internet and you can see all those tanks basically that are cutting down trees and clearing land. So this is not simply taking over land that was already cleared for a prison. There's something much bigger than that going on. And also, when you talk about greater crime in Atlanta, the United States, I talked before about how there is this cancer underneath every other cancer, and that is, of course, the undue influence of money on politics, which comes from the undue influence of money, specifically corporate greed in general. That has led, among other things, to the highest rate of poverty in the United States of any other advanced democracy. As long as there is such high income inequality, as long as there is so much despair, as long as there is so much poverty, as long as you have over half the people in the United States living to paycheck to paycheck, as long as you have so many people locked out of any possibility of real advancement in their lives, due to the sheer injustice of our system, there will be crime. So the crime itself is a symptom. The crime itself is not a cause. So if you look at the crime as the cause, and then all you think you need to do is to apply more brute force, that's like the old-fashioned model of illness and what we called allopathic medicine, where you didn't proactively cultivate health through nutrition, through exercise, through right living. You just waited till you almost inevitably became ill, and then you sought through external means to eradicate or to suppress the symptom. We have now evolved beyond the allopathic medicine to a far more holistic view of this, which is that you proactively cultivate health. And you can't just not proactively cultivate health, and then just seek to use, eradication or suppression of symptoms as the response to disease. We must proactively create a healthier society. And you proactively create a healthier society by proactively creating a more just society. Until there is justice, there will not be peace. And that is true domestically, and it is true internationally. And if all we're going to do, when these inevitable expressions of violence emerge from these petri dishes of injustice, is then seek to throw people into prison, or God knows in some of these cases even worse, that is not the way a free society operates. And it's certainly not the way things will operate if I'm president of the United States.
Thank you, Marianne. I appreciate that. And Tim, thanks for the question, my friend. I want to turn it over now to Darren D'Angelo, who Marianne is a big fan of yours on here. Darren, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thank you for hosting this space with Marianne. And Marianne, it's a pleasure to hear from you again.
Thank you, Darren.
So I'm glad that you tied up your point about peace. Where there's no justice, there's no peace. I wanted to know, do you envision the U.S. Department of Peace or the Peace Academy to overlap in training with the police, or ameliorating the more like fascist effects of the police as it is right now?
The Department of Peace would be training people in the skills of peace building. The skills of peace building include, there are 4 factors which, when present, statistically indicate there will be a higher incidence of peace in a community and a lower incidence of violence. And this is true whether it's a corner of an American city or whether it is another corner of the world. That is greater economic opportunities for women, greater educational opportunities for children, reduction of violence against women, and the amelioration of unnecessary human despair. In such communities, there will by definition be less crime, because crime is an expression of the violence. It is the violent expression. So definitely that. And also the Department of Peace, because what there would be at the center of it is a peace academy. And yes, there would be training for people who are experts at conflict resolution, restorative justice, all of those things, which could be used to augment the aspects of our policing, which have, appropriately to do with the use of brute force if and when necessary.
Levi, go ahead and jump in, my friend. I think you had a question there.
Okay, and then I must say that because I have another appointment after this one, I am going to have to wrap it up, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all your time tonight and
Thank
staying
you.
a bit later with us. We really appreciate
Okay,
it.
thank you. Okay, thank you so much for having me. Let's have this one last one.
Oh, and I appreciate it so much for you being on here once again. Really quick, if the Democratic primary turns out to be quite unfair in how it's structured, do you consider at all running as independent? Because sore loser laws do impact the ability for people after the primary to run as a third party.
My loyalty is to my country. George Washington, his criticism of political parties, he warned us about them in his farewell address. He said that they could form factions of men who he said would be more loyal to their party than to their country. And John Adams, then second president, right, of the United States, said that he feared that they could become the biggest threat to our democracy. I think at this point, the political parties, in certain ways, are seeking to supplant the founders as the arbiter of who is and who is not deemed qualified to be president of the United States. This is a problem. Now, having said that, I'm a big fan of Franklin Roosevelt, Eleanor Roosevelt. I was raised in a family of, the Roosevelt Democrats, and I still have faith that those principles, which have traditionally formed the core of the Democratic Party, can be restored. I am not trying to throw a bomb into the Democratic Party. I am standing for a restoration of the traditional principles of the Democratic Party. Um, I think that the corporatists within the establishment elite leadership of the Democratic Party look at people like myself as trying to hijack the party. We're not trying to hijack the party. We feel they hijack the party. So right now, I'm in the race I'm in. And I believe with enough people hearing me, enough people supporting me, I can win this primary. It's really up to the people who vote. It's up to you and anyone else who hears my message if you support it. And that is where my concentration and my focus is right now.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. Everyone listening in, we have pinned to the top of the space Marianne's interview with Stop Cop City activists from last month, if you want to check that out, as well as her Substack on Cop City as well, so you can read into more about what she said about this. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Any closing thoughts tonight?
No, just that I'm really happy that you did this because I think that, on all of these things, Victor Hugo's line, there's nothing so powerful as an idea whose time has come. I think there's a great coalescing of energy in the United States today. People are having new conversations, and the Stop Cop City is part of that larger one, and the ultimate repudiation of forces of injustice, whether it has to do with economic injustice or any other kind, criminal injustice, uh, racial injustice. So thank you for having me. I'm honored to be part of your conversation and glad to be part of the conversation that all of us are having, which is a real peaceful but very fiercely passionate revolution of consciousness in the United States today. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Marianne. And I do think we can probably shore up something with RFK and his side. So let's stay linked up for that. And Holden tends to moderate these spaces very diplomatically.
Okay, I'm all for it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Hope you have a wonderful night, Marianne.
You too. Thank you.
All right, we are going to keep the space open for a bit. Anyone who's in the audience and would like to come up, ask any more questions, if you want to just talk about what was said here tonight, feel free to come up and request a mic. We're happy to keep this going for a little while. I just wanted to mention on something that Marianne said at the end there. I really sincerely appreciated the mentioning of the words of our founding fathers, in both George Washington and John Adams, had very, very severe criticisms of a two-party system itself. John Adams called it the greatest threat to the Constitution that he had drafted. And George Washington obviously, left his time in office after 2 terms with his farewell address, specifically warning against the dangers of parties overcoming and usurping the will of the people, which I think we are definitely seeing, the risk of today. And there's a number of us here in the audience who are trying to work outside of that system and to, take down this two-party system and turn it into a multi-party system. And then there's, people like Marianne and RFK who are trying to reclaim it, reclaim these parties for